Welcome. How's everybody doing? Hope you are doing well. My name is Andrew Kuhn, Focus Compounding, sitting next to Geoff Gannon, wearing his third red shirt today. Just kidding. It's the third episode of Red Shirt. Okay. My fifth episode with my black shirt. How's it going today, Geoff?
It's going very well, Andrew. How's it going with you?
It's going great. Hope it's going great for everybody else as well. Hope everyone is having a great day. If this is the first time you're tuning in, be sure to check out all of our content. And the best place to get access to all of that is to go to focuscompounding.com/app. And what that'll do is that will take you to a place, if you're watching, that you can see right now, where you can get access to our 200 plus episode backlog of the podcasts, daily investing write-ups by Geoff, 2,000 words per write-up, and then frequent videos, behind the scenes type stuff. And of course, we have a lot of scuttlebutt trips planned. That's a very big part of our research. So we're going to record takeaways and take you with us on the road. And to get access to that, go to focuscompounding.com/app and sign up for $7.95 a month. Helps support everything that we do here. And we're definitely very appreciative of that. And also, in the future, we're going to take direct questions from individuals that do sign up. You can email me if you are a member at focuscompounding@gmail.com, and we'll make a video out of it for you and put it up on the site, on the app. So in today's episode, we're going to go through a write-up that you posted on the app that I thought was really good. And you had a lot of like good one-liners. And you were actually talking about your favorite value investing podcast.
Correct.
Val Hughes emailed me.
Yes.
It was in my spam. So if Val Hughes, values, right? Val Hughes, I didn't even realize that until I told Geoff, I'm like, I don't know, some guy named Val Hughes. He's like, oh, it's values, right?
Yeah.
He emailed me and it ended up in my spam basically saying, hey, heard that our podcast was Geoff's favorite. By the way, we're back. So I had to tweet it out. I had to tell Geoff. Geoff was very excited to hear that podcast was back.
Yep.
They took about, a 2-year hiatus?
Something like that,
Couple years. And you go through in this write-up, you say how listening to the Value Guys podcast can get you out of learning mode and into practicing mode. And you have, like I said, a lot of good one-liners, and you take us through this post on like what you like about, what you like about their podcast. But one thing I thought was interesting was you don't ever lead with like, there's a one size that fits all.
Okay.
You said Phil Fisher didn't spend a lot of time just sitting there reading 10Ks all day. There's many different ways to skin the cat. A lot of what he did was, talking to people in the industry, stuff like that. Warren Buffett obviously has spent a lot of his time reading 10Ks, but really it's whatever fits your personality, the way that you are, the way that you operate. And I thought that was interesting because you don't really I've never heard you kind of say that, I guess you could say, where, it's whatever kind of works for you when it comes to this. So I thought that was great. You go through talking about Bank of America and how a lot of people are naturally pretty interested in the stock because Buffett has purchased more of the company. But take me through first, like the Value Guy podcast. Like, why do you think it's a great podcast for people to listen to?
Right. So I gave two reasons. One, they don't take themselves or the show too seriously, which is a good thing. They give their opinions about whatever stuff they're talking about. And when they talk about our specific stocks, now they add in a little bit like of other stuff around it, but mainly it's just talking about specific stocks, which is great. That is the thing that's most important for people to do, is to learn about how to apply the general investing ideas that you have to specific stocks. So when they say, okay, here's my EBITDA divided by EV is my cash on cash yield that I'm getting, plus I'm going to get this amount of growth and stuff, they actually do the math on a specific stock to tell you that, instead of things where people are like, well, value investing is about EV to EBITDA or whatever. The biggest thing that's an issue that I get from most people I talk to is they study a ton about value investing stuff, and they do very, very little. They've actually read very few 10Ks. They've bought very few stocks that they picked on their own and everything. And they just haven't analyzed much individual stocks that they picked on their own. Instead, they've just read everything that Graham wrote or Fisher wrote or Greenblatt or whatever. They've read the biographies of Buffett. They've read textbooks on things. They've listened to our podcast and stuff, but they really haven't applied those ideas to specific stocks. And so a show that has weekly stock picks of some kind, and stock picks where they're like, these are okay stock picks sometimes. They're like, these are medium good stock picks. Sometimes they say, well, this one could go to zero or it could be good, but they're honest about that sort of thing and stuff, right? And like how you would look at it. So, I mean, it's not like a lot of research goes into the stocks that they pick or anything, but they do pick stocks and give a reason for why they do it. And it's a live example, which means that you'll see the mistakes that they make or the success that they have, and you can look at it and like go and analyze on your own. And they don't give a ton of detail on it in a way that would like kill the idea for you doing the research yourself. It's a very good source of like taking that idea and then doing something with it.
Do they ever follow up on past stock picks?
Sort of, but not really, no.
Yeah, so you did write in here, you said the biggest mistake I see new investors making is trying to learn instead of trying to do.
Yeah.
So I thought that was very interesting because
That's
a lot of
definitely
people,
the big one, yeah.
a lot of people, I think where they're hung up on, you know what I really think it is? I think it's valuation. That's what it is. A lot of people are always very hung up on valuation, and even I've been there, but majority of the questions we get is like, well, how do you value this, right? If you watch, different videos on how people value stocks, everyone does it differently. If you read a book, everyone does it differently. Do you use EBITDA? Do you use NOPAT? Do you use net income, cash flow? Do you use free cash? Like, what do you use? So I think that's where a lot of people get very hung up when it comes to just the learning process, because they feel like if they value a business, they're not doing it the right way, maybe because so many people do it so differently. And I think that's really where it comes in, like the art form of it, as opposed to it being just like an exact science.
Yeah, and since a lot of stocks go up 50% or down 35% or whatever in a given year pretty regularly, obviously people aren't all using the same approach. If they're all using the same approach and putting them in a model that way, it would be pretty hard to get inputs in the model that would be off by that much. That this could be a $65 stock or like a $150 stock, which is not an unusual range for a stock. So, it's people comparing those different things. And that's what we've talked about with different stocks. Obviously, people are using some sort of appraisal method for FICO and Chipotle. That's very different than what I could come up with. On the other hand, we talked about public storage and stuff. I'm like, okay, I mean, I wouldn't buy it necessarily and stuff, but that's something that makes a lot of sense, that you could have something trading at 20 times EBITDA. That's all just storage units and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So then you go on and you talk about riding other investor coattails and how in the long term, you don't actually think that's a good thing. And you give another good one-liner. You say, what will always be worth the most to you is your own self-improvement. And then you go through this, you talk about, mental exercise and exercising your brain and everything like that. Mental endurance is what you actually call it. So take me through that and your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think it's one of the most important things. And the biggest reason, like if you're not fishing a 10K, why not? I mean, it's not even a physical challenge that you'd have that you might be incapable of doing. I mean, you can't hold your breath for 30 minutes because you'll die. Your body will stop you eventually, but you can read for 3 hours. Your body won't stop you. Yeah. But people don't.
Well, the more you do it too, the more it's easy. It becomes a lot easier, I would say. Not even just reading a 10K, but just reading in general. Do you ever feel like you're sort of in like the groove of it, where it's like, the other day I was like, I feel like I've just been plowing through material lately, and it's just easy to do it once you've been doing it and you're sort of in the ebb and flow of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And you aren't getting distracted or whatever, just letting yourself get away from it that way. It's sort of like, I don't know if it's a procrastination thing or a temptation thing or whatever. People know that they should read a 10K or whatever, but then instead they are browsing things or reading things that are very superficial and stuff. Like I say in here, I actually think it's great to go to Value Investors Club and read the write-ups. I think it's great to read everything you can in Corner of Berkshire and Fairfax, but you have to go beyond that. It's great to get that and then to go and do the hard work yourself. Because instead, spending all your day at CNBC and Bloomberg and whatever and on Twitter and wherever, is like a very superficial way of doing it very fast. And it's kind of procrastinating from the real work that you need to be doing. You feel like you're doing investing work, right? But you're really not. And I was also saying that with this podcast, the Value Guys podcast, because it's dealing with specific stocks. I'd rather people who listen to our podcast and stuff listen to that podcast instead of listening to some other investing podcasts, because by doing that, you get away from just like the platitudes and whatever things that you get, or hearing the same things over and over again about that, and have it directly applied to specific stocks. And you also can learn from their mistakes and their successes and things about with you too, because you can look at it and be like, oh, I hate this stock idea, and then you see it does really well and stuff. They have shows going back more than 12 years or something, I think, because I know I was listening to them during the financial crisis and everything, so they definitely have a backlog going back that far. They're at about the same number of episodes as us. Oh no, they're more, 300, I think.
What I think it is it's the instant gratification. So on an episode you were talking once how whenever you have like a great year, people are like, wow, good job. And you're like, yeah, I guess I made the right decision 2 to 3 years ago. So it's the instant gratification, you know,
Yeah,
and
Peter Lynch was saying it takes 3 to 10 years for his best ideas to work out.
And even Buffett, a lot of ideas, I mean, he would be buying for years, you know, and we always, the mental, I would just say the discipline it does take to actually do that, because again, we look back in history and we're like, oh, over a period of 10 years or 15 years, this is what they did. But that when you're actually living it out, be like, wow, that takes a lot of discipline. Like that's a very long time. But the instant gratification when you are studying a company or whatever, and maybe you pass on it, people just automatically think in their head like, oh, I guess that was a waste of time. And we've talked a lot about how that's not a waste at all, right? You learned about whatever company that it was.
Yeah, the other thing I said further on in it, I think, is that you're always going to feel smarter and it's going to feel safer to do the reading the books and stuff. You feel like from reading the Snowball, you're getting smarter and wiser and whatever things, because you're not having to apply any of it though. So the big thing with having to pick actual stocks and listen to these stock picks and stuff is that it's risking looking very stupid. When you pick stocks every week on a show, you risk looking really dumb, because you'll say this is whatever this business is, and then it turns out that it really goes in a different direction from what you were predicting. Both ways, that you go, oh, I don't really like this thing, this is kind of dangerous and whatever, and then it turns out to be a big success, or the reverse, where you like something a lot and it turns out to not be as safe or whatever, and your perception of it can be wrong, your analysis of it. So I think that it's kind of people are very big on self-improvement stuff, but they're very big on like reading the self-improvement stuff, not actually doing the work that's going to get you there. And the problem with investing stuff that I was saying is like different. I was giving you the example like, oh, is reading 10K like a muscle or whatever? Well, in one way, but not in the other way, which is that actually it's more complex. And so that way, in terms of your feelings about whether you're making progress, it's a lot harder. That's the part that is people will be like difficult. You will feel dumb doing it because you have to put yourself out there and risk things and stuff, in terms of you have to actually pick things. You can't just be trying to do the same thing that everyone else is doing. You can't just copy what other people are doing. And the other part about that is, in my experience, people will hold stocks for longer and will bet more on those stocks, put more of their portfolio into it, if it's their own ideas, if they did the homework on it.
More
now, they could find it from somewhere else. But I've just always found that people come to me and are like, oh, I'm thinking about investing in this thing because Pabrai is invested in, or because Ackman is invested, or Buffett or whatever. They just get out of it very fast when something goes negative on it at all, which is fine.
When the business goes negative, or the price goes negative, or the stock?
The stock goes negative, or the person who was in it says something not quite as positive about it or something. They're just very, and they're very worried. A lot of times I get things from people that are like, well, how quickly will I know that they're out of it? And all those sorts of things. And that's not something that you're going to make a lot of money on if you're that skittish about it. So the thing that you are going to have a lot of success with is learning to pick stocks on your own. And the first step to that, I think, for most people, or for a lot of people who are having trouble with that, is listen to a show where they pick stocks like every week. Because if you do that, then you're going to hear why they're picking them and stuff. You're going to be able to go in that industry and look for other things. I mean, when that show started, the thing that was great about it, that's a great exercise I'd recommend for other people, is they read Value Line each week, right? So they just take each issue of Value Line and they'd pick a few stocks from it that they liked. And then, as we mentioned, I think Value Line didn't like that idea.
Yeah, they cut them off.
Yeah. So
bad marketing on their part.
Yeah. So because I would like to follow along with them with Value Line.
Yeah, because once you want to get, if you're a fan of the show, you get the same Value Line, just see what they're looking at.
Absolutely, and you can see that they'd only pick whatever 3 to 5 stocks or whatever out of a Value Line that some Value Line I think has like 120 stocks in or something. Value Line covers 1,700 stocks every 13 weeks. So there you go. It's a lot of stocks. And it would cover particular industries and stuff that way. That is something I recommend to people. I would, actually, as much as we just said negative things about Value Line. I would, instead of going and getting a membership to a website, your Morningstars, your Guru Focuses, your whatever, that give you ability to research everything, oddly, limiting yourself so that you can only research the 1/13 of the universe that Value Line sends you every week, I think is really useful. And actually, that's something I think about reading stuff too. I do find that actually the thing I talked to you about Jamie Dimon, he kind of mentioned that you want to sometimes try to read stuff that you wouldn't normally read. Not too much.
I thought that was interesting.
Not like way off topic. I'm not saying go and read Eastern philosophy things at the same time that you're reading your 10K, but try to find things that are a little out there on the edges of what you would normally read, things you might disagree with, things that, to broaden your horizons that way or whatever.
I thought that was interesting in that podcast when he said that he wakes up at whatever it was, 5 o'clock every day and reads for an hour and a half. And he says he always tries to read a little bit of material that he just isn't interested in or would not regularly read, just to sort of broaden his horizons a little bit. And I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, and that's just for Value Line. If you ever do subscribe to Value Line, that's the really useful thing, is if you actually make it a practice of like, I'm going to sit down for a few hours every week with Value Line, right? There will be weeks where, and from their old shows, you can tell this, there are weeks that they're like, this are not good industry. Like, it'll be like Northeast banks and the aggregates industry or, whatever it is, the random things that they have, like, it's like this week you get to pick a home builder or a foreign utility or something, because Value Line only covers certain industries each week. And so that does force you to look at those things. And that is useful. And I do try to force myself to look at some industries that people would be surprised that I wouldn't think that I'd ever invest in. You do try to look at them and analyze and stuff. Now, on the other hand, I don't look at like giant stocks, and people know that. And I could easily, but I feel like that's almost more of a gossipy sort of thing, because the only thing I would get out of it, we don't invest in stocks like that, is I'd be able to talk to people about Bank of America and Wells Fargo and Facebook and whatever. But that's almost like not as useful to me as finding an industry that I might not look at, some cloud thing that's small or whatever.
Yeah.
And then broaden my horizons that way.
Yeah, I thought this was a very interesting part from this write-up. You were talking about reading 10Ks or just doing research. And then you said, and it doesn't have to be 10Ks. Some of the best investors ever spent little time reading 10Ks or annual reports. I don't think Peter Lynch spent a ton of time reading 10Ks. I think he spent a ton of time talking to company management and trying to figure out the story of the company and the industry. Phil Fisher didn't spend a lot of time reading 10Ks either. He spent a lot of time talking to everyone in an industry he was interested in. So maybe reading a 10K a day won't be the road you take to becoming a better investor. It might not suit your style, but I know what won't work for you. Just reading books won't work. So I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with taking the approach of anything else besides the 10K if you're 100% focused on that stock or that industry and you're doing like the investigation, tracking down the story yourself.
And I can't say how much it's helped me, right? Yeah. Going on these road trips and really getting ingrained in the story and knowing the story outside of the financials, you know, and then adding context to the financials because of the story.
Yeah.
That's all a number is. I mean, that's all financials are, right? There's not a lot of, yes, you could get stuff from them, but trying to add context to the numbers from, things outside of the filings is something that I try to do.
Yeah. And so I just like, the thing that's hard about it is, like Peter Lynch would talk about or whatever, that he wants to have like a 2-minute pitch for the stock or whatever, which is true. Once you understand a stock really well, you'll just talk about it in like a minute or two. It'll sound so obvious to people when they hear what you're saying. But the work that went into that was focusing in on that story for a long period of time. The same thing. So when you read a Peter Lynch book or Phil Fisher book, they summarize the situation with the company in a paragraph or something, but they have an understanding of it that other people didn't because they went in and they learned about it and stuff. So there's nothing wrong with, instead of reading 10K a day, sitting down and saying, okay, I'm going to try to find online everything I can about this company. I'm going to try to find the contact information for all the people I want to talk to about this. I'm going to do talking to them, emailing them, whatever, and have that be part of your day. But the important thing is not to instead just like passively spend that hour on Twitter instead, or on Corner Berkshire and Fairfax, sort of like find those tickers that you want to learn about and then actually do that research on your own. Because when you think about it, Peter Lynch and Phil Fisher would not do that.
No, they were on the road and talking to management, and
they would not just listen to
over the rocks.
What other people are saying and not do it. I mean, the one thing about all the investors we talk about, they have very different styles and stuff, but they independently and actively research stocks. They do the work themselves and they don't listen to what the crowd is saying and stuff. They just use that as a jumping off point to learn more about a business.
Cool. Well, I want to thank everybody so much for tuning in with Geoff and I on the Focus Compounding Podcast. Make sure you check out The Value Guys. They are on iTunes and I'm assuming Spotify as well. If you want to get access to this write-up and other write-ups just like this, go to focuscompounding.com/app, and then you will get the keys, the premium access to this, and you'll get access to all the videos that we upload, our backlog of podcasts, and write-ups by Geoff, which he uploads every single day. So focuscompounding.com/app. I want to thank everybody so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for the support. A rating and review still goes a very long way for us on iTunes. Definitely very appreciative of that. And we will see you in the next podcast.